this is like the period when we get the beginnings of these myths of like super swords, like Durandal or Grunting, or like I think these various things where you could make good steel in India, right? And small amounts of good steel would sometimes come in. And you could actually have a sword that was a lot better. So this is just me kind of stereotyping. But there were some swords that were more good than other swords because they needed good materials. Part of the super.
Yeah, it's also interesting to think about what the qualities were that were valuable in these like mythical weapons. So like when they talk about a weapon being really good, it's the ability to bend it over your head and not necessarily like yes we discuss or they discuss weapons like sleeping with phone 2 or something, but it's ability to like retain its shape, actual steel properties.
Which just it means it's steel.
Yeah.
Right? That's heat treated. This sword is 11th century. Late 11th century. And it appears to have possibly been on the First Crusade. Entirely clear. But the reason that Oakeshott thought this is, well, it definitely dates. And there is an engraving on the blade, which you see when you look at it, that is a doorway and 2 sets of columns, and then 2 entwined crosses at the end of it, which likely represent the reunification of the Western churches after the conquest of Jerusalem. This is the kind of thing that a medieval knight would likely do if they went to Jerusalem, were absolved of all of their sins, and they were a sinner, right? They were a knight. And this is a period when knights had little relationship with the church. Right? The crusade was an attempt on part by the church to get control over this class of warlords in Europe, and to bind them to a new kind of allegiance, right? And so, by getting this, when you get there, right, it is a reminder and a memento, and possibly in part a sacred relic that reminds you of that. Right? You also, on the end, this side, toward the tip, if you look at it, there is a hand pointing towards the tip of the sword, which is the benedictine, right? The benediction of the church. I like to think of it as the smite of God on there. And there are 3 things that look like daisies that are probably Greek crosses, 3 of them mean on there. Oakeshott thought that this sword was associated in some way with Sicily.
Right.
But maybe not.
Yeah, we have one of our youngest fellows on the job doing more extensive research into trying to figure out what additional history can we dig up about this particular piece. Because it really is, regardless of where it came from, it's a fascinating piece and like incredibly important.
Yeah. So on this one, the pommel and the blade are original, right? It says the grip and the crossguard have been replaced. So you can hold it like this. They were not found with the object. This crossguard, I can personally think it may have been a little bit longer originally, just proportion-wise. But the grip length is right because the tang is there, right? So that's how big the grip was. So in this period, chainmail was the armor technology in Europe. There were no fighting books. We have tapestries and we have stories about martial feats at this time, some of which are believable, some of which are superhero stories, right? About magic swords and paladins, chopping people. Things to think about with this sword is it is extremely thin. It has a very subtle hollow grind on it, so it is thinner in the center, it's slightly thicker at the shoulders before tapering down to an edge. It is clearly steel, right? It has flex to it. Don't flex it. And it's sharp, right? It's sharp. So we have tapestries and things with people of swords like this, cleaving each other in the great helm, whatever. This would have been a knightly sword, but the sword at the time was a sidearm. And so your sword isn't really often what you're slaying other armored knights with. You're killing them with a spear, usually, right? This is mostly for killing the people who have a lot less armor, although we do see like representations of people getting killed in armor with swords, probably because it was wicked cool. They were like, he
Saw
is
it once.
so strong. He totally cut through that guy's armor, right? I don't think it happened a lot. Yeah, so this piece is fascinating kind of piece of history. I showed it to a historian, and I was talking to him about the King Roger of Sicily, who famously didn't want to go on crusade, and when the Crusaders all came to his court, he stood up in his courtroom during a feast and farted really loud and said, "This is what I think of your crusade." Classy kings of Italy. Do you want to talk about movement?
Go for it. I've got some thoughts, but
Okay. So this sword is one that we have almost never brought anywhere before because it is extremely delicate. This is from the 13th century, and grip is original. So the wood and the leather on this are over 700 years old. So do not pick it up by the grip, please. And when you hold it by the blade, the pommel, and you can look at it. This, Ewart thought, was the prototypical knightly sword of that high medieval period. And we see representations of swords of this shape in lots of tapestries and paintings showing knightly combat from the period. It also is extremely thin. It's less than a millimeter thick out in the weak of the blade. Right? And it's not because of corrosion. Right? There is some corrosion. You can see some pitting on it. There's more pitting on one side than the other, which means the side with the pitting was probably wherever it was hung or kept. That side was exposed probably to a smoky interior. So candle smoke, stuff is sticky. It'll stick to the side of a sword that is out, if it's on a wall or on something. And then other stuff will stick to that soot, which makes it corrode a little more. The back side is typically more protected. So that's one of the tricks you can look at a sword, like, are both sides similarly preserved? If not, it'll tell you something about the way that that sword worked. This guy, I think, breaks all kinds of rules that we think of today in sword fighting. So, like sword makers, over the past, at least 3 decades, but really a little longer than that, have had a continuing battle against Hollywood and about social conceptions about how heavy medieval swords were, and so we taught them that we've been teaching people that actual medieval swords are really light, and this sword is light, but it's heavy in weird ways. And some medieval swords were actually really heavy, just not all of them, right? So this sword, the blade is super light, and this pommel is a giant honker on here that is heavy. Right? So the point of balance on this sword is almost exactly at the guard, which is weird. Wow. Usually the point of balance is out in front of the guard, where it's weird to us, often now. Looking at all of the illustrations of these things that look just like this, it seems like it was not weird at the time to have that.
So, correct me if I'm mistaken, this is the holotype of the Type 14 blade, right? This is the one that you were to use to describe what Type 14 blades are, which is kind of cool. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Type specimen.
This is one of 2 of like the really, well, I guess not including Bronze Age. They're the most fascinating of the grips. Like, I'm a grip nerd. I think we spend a lot of time looking at blades and not enough time